Hey everyone, and welcome back to That Engineering Girl. Today I thought I'd share with you how I finance and how I track my expenses and how I essentially budget. Now this isn't a long process because it's very important to be time efficient as students, so I hope you find what I do helpful and you can incorporate it in whatever you do yourself. And without further ado, let's get into it. Alright, hello everyone and welcome to the voiceover. So I'm just going to start off by saying that I actually do this the manual way. Yes, you can do all of this on Excel or some fancy software, but I actually choose to do this by hand. I just find it way easier to just jot it down right away and just look at it afterwards. Maybe it's a bit archaic, but I just prefer it this way. You can do it however you like. Alright, so jumping right into it, you can see at the top I have the year written down. This is actually incorrect, so I'm going to fix it to 2021. I also have the date for which this particular page covers, so this is for February 4th to March 3rd. I have my spending goal written down and fixed expenses. So this expense actually transferred over to next month, so I'm just going to cancel that out for now and write down a quick note. You can also see that I have my miscellaneous expenses written down, and these are just expenses that come up during the month that I haven't necessarily planned for. So you can see that I spent some money on pizza, on some books, on some hygiene items, and so on and so forth. Some money I spent on my design project that I'm completing this semester, so more on that to come later on. You can see that I mark all expenses with a negative sign, and anything that's a quote-unquote profit is marked with a positive sign. So at the end, what I do is I grab my good old calculator, my Schulich calculator. So for engineering, you know that they only allow you non-scientific calculators and very specific ones. So here's my handy dandy one. So I essentially just total it all up and see what my total comes to. Now, if my total does come out to be a negative number, I write it in red just to indicate to myself that I had a net expense. If it comes out to be a positive number, I write it in green to indicate to myself that I had a net surplus. So over here, you can just see me punching in all the numbers and eventually coming out to have a total of $83.11. So I had a net surplus this month, so I'm just going to write that down in green. So I'll show you some of my previous sheets from previous months. So in this month I spent about $7. In this month I spent about $100. So as you can see, it's written in red. And obviously none of this is extremely pretty, and that's the whole point, right? It's just to keep track of things. It doesn't necessarily need to be extremely aesthetic to the eyes. So now I'm going to work on my sheet for this month. So like I mentioned, I write the year first, my starting date, so I'm starting from March 4th. I always write the end date when I actually finish the sheet at the end of the month, so I'm going to leave that blank for now. Now I'm going to write down my spending goal, which is usually $50, and this is just a ballpark number that I've set for myself. I do aim to spend less, but it is what it is. Now I'm going to write some fixed expenses, and I think it's the perfect time to mention that I am South Asian, and so that comes with its perks for sure. And what I mean by that is I'm still living with my parents, and we have a lot of combined costs. So a lot of the normal fixed expenses that you would see are not showing up here, like food and rent and cell phone bills and so on and so forth. Moving on, I only have one fixed expense really, and like I mentioned, that's my dentist expense for this month. And then I'm going to write down some variable expenses. So I had some expenses already, and they actually counted towards this month, so I just transferred them over from the previous sheet to this sheet because I was under the impression that it would actually count towards my monthly bill last month, but they didn't. So as you can see, I'm just transferring them over here. Now, I do want to mention that fixed expenses are really just any expenses that you can anticipate for the month. So they don't have to be reoccurring every single month, they just need to be expected for the month. Variable expenses are things that just come up during the month, and that's kind of where I'm tracking what's happening and how am I spending my money. Now I'm just going to mark off a section for the total that I write down at the end of the month, and I just do this at the beginning of the month when I'm actually creating the sheet, just so I can mark it off and kind of reserve that space. And that's it. That's how I budget every single month and keep track of my expenses. I hope you found this video useful and the process that I use to budget. So with that, I hope you enjoyed and see you next week.